see if I got this. There we go. Thank you very much. It's beautiful. Good morning and welcome to today's worship service. We're so grateful that you're here with us today. My name is Rebecca. I am the service coordinator at All Souls Church, where our mission is to seek truth, practice love, and celebrate life. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you've been a member for a long time, you're welcome here. Whatever faiths you have known or not known, or whatever your heritage, you are welcome here. Whatever questions you hold, whatever truths you seek, whatever sorrow you have known, whatever joy that is in your heart, whoever you are and whomever you love, you are welcome here. I would call your attention to the announcements that are in the program. Are there any other announcements anyone would like to make?
Good morning. I'm Sue Ann Lang, and I'm part of a committee team started by Kevin Kolb that will be working with our congregation to do our, I guess, annual. This is our 5th or 6th year of doing this to Rosebud to help a couple very rural schools. But before I kind of tell you a little bit about that, I'd like to draw your attention that we are on native land. We are on Lakota, Dakota, Nakota land. And if I remembered my studies better, I could tell you exactly which. But we are on their ancestral lands. So keep that in your mind. So anyway, we will be collecting items for the principal and the teachers of these 2 very rural elementary schools in Rosebud to put together and send home with their children, because they will not be at school for breakfast or lunch. And that will put a huge burden, quite literally, on the grandparents and the parents and the aunties and the uncles that are caring for these young people. So, in your bulletin, you will see a list of items. If you are an individual you're more comfortable with just giving cash, that's fine too, because there will be an opportunity for the principal to use whatever cash is given to put together food baskets. And there'll be, if you get the e-blast, you'll see some information about that in there. So however you can, however much, feel free. These will be in the back, and it's going to be a great month. And then they will get delivered probably to Chamberlain, where we'll meet with a representative from Rosebud, and it'll go back, and it will be given to the children. Do you know, I guess we have not heard anything specific this year. However, I don't know if you have kids or not, but mine always outgrew everything from the last year. So, even if you have, I cleaned my bookshelf out, even if you have books that are children's books, native themed or what, that would be fine. No, nothing is refused. I think, better. I won't say that. Never mind. Thank you.
Any other announcements? No? Okay. So now we turn to Carol for our prelude. So we now are going to do the chalice lighting, and for this one we have something a little special that we will be doing. I direct you to number 446. It's called To the Four Directions.
Spirit of the east, spirit of air, of morning and springtime, be with us as the sun rises in times of beginning, times of planting. Inspire us with the fresh breath of courage as we go forth into new adventures.
Spirit of the south, spirit of fire, of the noontime and summer, be with us through the heat of the day and help us to be ever growing. Warm us with strength and energy for the work that awaits us.
Spirit of the west, spirit of water, of evening and autumn, be with us as the sun sets and help us to enjoy a rich harvest. Flow through us with a cooling, healing quietness and bring us peace.
Spirit to the north, spirit of earth, of nighttime and winter, be with us in the darkness and in the time of gestation. And now we're going to be doing our opening song, number 170. Please rise if you are able in spirit and in body to join us.
Gentle and
thank you. And now for our first reading, number 551. I will read the text, and then if you would respond with the italic text. Earth, teach me. Earth, teach me stillness, as the grasses are stilled with the light.
Earth, teach me suffering, as old stones suffer with memory.
Earth, teach me caring, as parents who secure their young.
Earth, teach me courage, as the tree which stands all alone.
Earth, teach me limitation, as the ant which crawls on the ground.
Earth, teach me freedom, as the eagle which soars in the sky.
Earth, teach me resignation, as the leaves which die in the fall.
Earth, teach me regeneration, as the seed which rises in the spring.
Earth, teach me to forget myself, as melted snow forgets its life.
Earth, teach me to remember kindness, as dry fields weep with rain.
That was from the UT Indians of North America. So now we have our story for all ages. I would invite any children that we have to come up if you'd like. This is called The Trickster Shadow. Zune was an ordinary boy with a peculiar problem. His shadow would not leave him alone. At home, when Zune was trying to clean up, it would jump all around his room, knocking everything over. "Why is your room always a mess?" his mother would say. In school, it would tease the other children, and Zune would always get the blame. "Please stop disrupting the class," his teacher scolded. One day, Zune was playing soccer when his shadow tripped him. His friends laughed. His shadow laughed. Zune cried. He ran off to his Nokomis for help. That's his grandmother. At Nokomis's house, his shadow was nowhere to be seen. His Nokomis almost didn't believe him when he told her about it. But she was wise, and she had heard of these things before. She pulled an old drum out of a chest. She dusted it off and began to sing. Her voice danced, filling the room like a warm light. The beating drum held their hearts steadfast. "This belonged to your Meshumis. He would have wanted you to have it," she said, handing him the drum. "We call this a duegian." Sorry about the pronunciation. "The sound of the heart. Use it when you need help guiding your own." "Migweg Nokumis," he thanked her for feeling, and he was feeling much better. On his way home, Zune was mesmerized by the drum, and so was his shadow. It jumped around like a wild dog, knocking into his shoulder, nearly making him drop it. Zune yelled, "Stop!" and he started to run away, but his shadow didn't listen and kept pace with every step. Zune had had enough. He stood tall like a bear and yelled, "Leave me alone!" and he beat the drum. His shadow was angry. It grew twice as big. Its hairs stood up on its back and it snarled at him. He kept beating the drum. Zune started swinging his drumstick as hard as he could. The shadow dodged every swing. It was a shadow, after all. Zune grew tired. The shadow grew bigger. It consumed all he could see. There was nothing left but darkness. All he could hear was his heart beating loudly inside his chest. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, With the drum in his hand, he began to play. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. His heart slowed, beating in rhythm with the drum. He envisioned his spirit was like a bear, big and strong, and he began to sing. In his song, his spirit lit up the sky, above shimmering like the northern lights. It playfully jumped around, dancing to the beat of the drum. Zun's shadow danced along. When the song was over, Zun held his new spirit within himself. He felt the strength of the bear. He felt the love of his Mishumis and all of his ancestors all around him. Migwe, he said, smiling. Zun was an ordinary boy, together with his shadow. All right, so shall we sing the children out? Thank you. In this congregation, we have found it helpful to share our ups and downs of our lives by the practice of taking a stone from a bowl, holding it in our hand, warming it and expressing our thoughts of a joy or a concern, and then placing the stone in the water so that the ripples of the water carry our joys and concerns out into the wider world. I will begin by it's a little bit of a joy and a sadness that I'm happy that marching band season is over. I have my Saturdays back, and both of my kids absolutely love marching band, and it's been a great season, and they did really well. That's a joy. And I'm sad that it is over because I do have a senior, and it was his last performance, and he said he got a little bit misty, but he did okay. He didn't cry during but that's a little bit of a joy concern. So I invite anyone else to come up and share their joys and concerns.
Hi, I'm Scott. I moved some peonies in my yard, and now I have spare roots. They're in the narthex, right next to the plant. If anyone has room for some pink peonies, please claim as many roots as you want. And my probation for work has been extended another 4 days, so we'll see what happens next week.
Good morning. This is a stone of concern for my granddaughter Nadia's dad. He was in the hospital for 6 days. He's returned home, but he has some very significant health issues to deal with. So the joy is that he is home.
Hi, I'm Dan. This last week we had a technician from Denver. His name was Matthew, and he installed that little white guy hanging there. You may not notice it, but it's picking up our sound better. And we also have a compressor back there that has been put into the sound system, and Terry is putting this system together for us so we have better sound as we sing, as we share our words into live stream. So this is something I'm celebrating today. Another thing I'm celebrating is an opportunity that I had 38 years ago when I lived in the Fargo-Moorhead area, and people were literally sleeping under the bridges. They were so cold, and the people in the community said we need to do something, and I was with a group of people that helped start Churches United for the Homeless. And so they are having a fundraiser this coming Thursday, and I'm going to go up there again. They now have a shelter. they have medical care, they have food, they have clothing, they have housing that they can afford. This is a great thing going on in the Fargo-Moorhead area. And they simply call it Churches United now. But anyway, I'm going to go up with my friend John Behringer. He's the one who has the wife who has had a bone marrow transplant. So this stone's going to represent thankfulness for that, and also that her bone marrow transplant is so far working great, and a tribute to the medical people and also to her perseverance. It's been a tough road, but all that's wrapped up in a lot of joy.
So, I am Carol. Can you hear me? No. Okay. No? I am in need of some prayers. My husband died, as most of you know, and my dear closest friend, who's been my friend for over 30 years, has been consoling me and keeping me steadfast. And she recently discovered that she now has melanoma, skin cancer, and a particularly dangerous form of it. And so she will be having surgery this next week to determine whether this has moved into her system. And so we're dealing with that because this is a life kill. This is a killer, skin cancer. So if you could please this week, each day say a little prayer for my friend. Her name is Teresa. Thank you.
I'll put a stone of joy for the fact that on Tuesday, President Liz signed the paperwork to complete the sale of the house to Habitat for Humanity.
Now I will put in one final stone to represent those joys and concerns that are unshared. And I invite you now to have a moment of silent reflection as we consider what we've just heard and also what may be laying on our own hearts and minds. And now we will move on to our second song, number 315. I invite you to rise as you're able and join along. 6:14 for our second reading. It is called the Sacred Hoop. I will read the regular text, and if you would read the italicized text. Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all. And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell. For I was seeing in the sacred manner the shape of all things of the Spirit. And I saw that the sacred hoop of my people was one of many hoops that make one circle, wide as daylight and starlight. And in the center grew one mighty flowering tree, to shelter all the children of one mother and one father. And I saw that it was holy. And that is by Black Elk. So now we have our message. Thank you.
As Sue Ann was giving their land acknowledgement. Are we on? I think so, yeah. I thought to myself, we don't do this every Sunday because I feel like it's too easy to indulge in white guilt, but we do have the banner by Jerry Fogg, and to me that is our nonverbal land acknowledgement that's before us every time we come in this sanctuary. And I'm really grateful for that, and that reminder of the way Sioux Falls looked before it was called Sioux Falls. So keep that in mind as you come in and join in this time together as often as you can. 1 month ago today, on September 26th, United States Secretary of War Pete Hegseth denied the request by Lakota Nation leaders to take back the medals of honor which had been given to 20 U.S. Army officers after the so-called Battle of Wounded Knee in 1890. We'll come back to that a little while later. First, go farther back in time. In the 1700s, 30 to 60 million buffalo were in North America when the Europeans first came. The buffalo were the centerpiece of the native economy. Lakota were among the healthiest people in North America at that time. Their diet of buffalo and other wild game, wild fruits, and vegetables that they grew, according to the American Economic Review, resulted in them being the tallest people in the world at that time. And they enjoyed a standard of living equal to or better than that enjoyed in Europe at the same time. When the native people began to add horses to their economy, they became more prosperous than ever. Some 30,000 Lakota people controlled everything from Lake Superior in the east to the Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming in the west. The American soldiers and explorers were blind to this prosperity and to the value of the buffalo-based economy. In 1834, President Andrew Jackson's administration designated the 1,500-mile prairie west of the Missouri River as permanent Indian frontier. 14 years later, in 1848, gold was discovered in California, and soon wagon trains trespassed across buffalo land. In 1850, California became a state, And then the Transcontinental Railroad was an ambitious and urgent project. Newspaperman John O'Sullivan coined the term manifest destiny, claiming that white people's great experiment of liberty was intended by God himself to spread across the entire North American continent. And so, in a spirit of greed, from 1850 to 1900, the official map of Lakota territory was drawn and redrawn 5 different times, each time giving the Lakota people less and less land, breaking the 1851 Fort Laramie Treaty and the 1868 Great Sioux Reservation Treaty. Another component of the perfect storm that led to the wiping out of the buffalo came from across the Atlantic in Germany, where a new tanning technique made buffalo hides in high demand for making fine leather into robes and hats. So, U.S. Army Colonel instructed his troops to kill every buffalo you can. Every buffalo dead is an Indian gone. And the buffalo were killed at a rate of 2 million per year for several years in the late 1900s. After the Civil War ended, the United States could turn its attention to the westward expansion again. In 1869, President Ulysses S. Grant decided to solve the Indian problem because of the fact that they were impeding the progress in this westward expansion, to solve that problem with a creative peace policy that disregarded separation of church and state. Grant appointed Christian missionaries to serve as Indian agents on the reservations. These men were considered moral and beyond corruption and were charged with civilizing the natives by converting them to Christianity. That would be the best way to keep them from having to be exterminated, was the rationale. Christian agents made it illegal to practice the sun dance or any other traditional Lakota ceremony. The Episcopal Church was given exclusive rights to the Dakota Territory. And so 26,929 Lakota souls. Charles Hawley, one of these missionaries, said his aim was the same as General Custer's, but instead of guns, my weapon is the Word of God. Well, I found myself wondering, were Unitarians involved in this activity as land agents? And so I Googled it, and Google now relies on artificial intelligence, as you probably know. And so there were, in fact, apparently 2 Indian agencies that were run by Unitarians, but it's not clear where they were. But in any case, the assimilationist goals were the same everywhere. And there was apparently a Unitarian convert named Elaine Goodale Eastman, who was an educator at the Pine Ridge Agency. And so they had, with good intention, desiring to civilize and Christianize the Native Americans at that time. And then there's a paragraph called Later Unitarian Involvement, and we made that paragraph. Later, some Unitarians were critical of the racist policies of the 19th and early 20th centuries. For example, All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church in Sioux Falls has specifically addressed the history of abuse at Native American boarding schools and institutions like the Hiawatha Indian Insane Asylum in Canton, reflecting a modern understanding of historical injustices. So, as the Lakota people lost their funeral rituals, they began to feel astelia, diminished, to being subhuman. It was especially hard on Lakota women and their ceremonies because of the Christian focus on a male god and insistence that women change their family names to that of their husbands. And losing their religious practices would later give rise to the ghost dance. And that was, incidentally, a mistranslation. It was originally called Spirit Dance, but somehow the Ghost Dance was the name that caught and took hold. So author Vine Deloria Jr. wrote, "When the missionaries arrived, they had only the book and we had the land. Now we have the book and they have the land." These kindly old missionaries were really land agents who helped rape the tribe of its land base. The Black Hills, of course, is one of the thorniest issues. After the Civil War, the United States national debt had ballooned to 40 times what it had been before the war. And there had been rumors that there was gold in the Black Hills. And so in 1874, General Custer and his men entered the Black Hills claiming to be on a peaceful mission. When they discovered gold, the government thought it could help pay off the national debt. And so the officials tried to negotiate a purchase for $6 million, and Chief Crazy Horse said, "One does not sell the land the people walk on." And Chief Red Cloud said the offer was just a little spit out of my mouth. In retaliation for their refusal, the United States stopped the promised payments of cash and food that had been ordered by the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. Not too long after that discovery of gold, Custer's men were reinforced with 1/3 of the U.S. military at that time. That many soldiers were sent to South Dakota. The idea was that they would accomplish two things. They would take care of the Indian problem, and they would also be able to reinforce a majority in Congress. So in 1889, as you know from your history, South Dakota became a state. And so at first, the ghost dance presence on reservations didn't really bother the federal officials, but in November 1890, 2 South Dakota congressional seats were up for grabs. And this is no reference to the current political situation, but at that time, the Republican President Benjamin Harrison decided to use the ghost dance for political gain. Sending in the army would be popular with settlers because large numbers of soldiers mean profits for local merchants and military contractors. And so 1/3 of the army was sent to South Dakota, the largest campaign since the Civil War. Newspapers printed inflammatory rumors. Suddenly, white settlers were reading that impassioned dancing would lead to violent revolt, that there were as many as 15,000 armed Lakota, which was not true, that attack was imminent, and ghost dancers had already murdered settlers and soldiers, which also was not true. And Harrison's gamble worked. Both South Dakota seats went Republican. And the soldiers swarmed Lakota country, arresting and jailing the ghost dancers. Up at the Standing Rock Agency, the federal agent in charge wanted the police to arrest Sitting Bull, and he was soon killed. And his followers, and Sitting Bull was one of the leaders of this so-called ghost dance. Hundreds of his people fled in fear, and walking in the winter cold for approximately 75 miles, this would have been in November and December of 1890 after that election. These starved, footsore, and ragged men, women, and children reached Spotted Elk, another respected leader, who American soldiers called Bigfoot, and they joined together and headed toward the south where there was a stronghold, and they had heard that other believers would be dancing and praying and waiting for the Messiah. So we have to kind of flesh this out a little bit. This was a apocalyptic movement, and it reminds me of the book of Revelation in the New Testament, which was written at a time of severe persecution by Rome for the early Christians. And so in the face of all that suffering, there was this eagerness to be brought to the next world. And so there's these fantastic descriptions of a new heaven and a new earth and streets of gold and all of that wonderful future that people could look forward to. And so in the same way, this ghost dance had taken off and become very popular all along the west coast of the United States and Canada, and then it came to the central part of the country as well. And so they there's a really amazing description of it, how they would dance. So this was written by a young anonymous Lakota man who had come back from one of the boarding schools feeling like his life needed to be back home with his people. And so this is how the people thought of it. It was started by a leader from Nevada, from the Paiute Nation, and he was a Christ-like figure, they said, and he talked about a beautiful future. The dead are to return. The buffalo are to return. The Dakota people will get back their own way of life. The white people will soon go away, and that will mean happier times for us once more. That part about the dead returning was what appealed to me. The people wearing the sacred skirts and feathers, sacred shirts and feathers now formed a ring. All walked cautiously and in awe, feeling their dead were close at hand. The leaders beat time and sang as the people danced, going round to the left in a sidewise step. They danced without rest, on, and this would go on for up to 4 and 5 days. And they got out of breath, but still they kept going as long as possible. Occasionally, someone thoroughly exhausted and dizzy fell unconscious into the center and lay there as if dead. After a while, many lay about in that condition. They were now seeming to be dead and seeing their loved ones. As each one came to, she or he slowly sat up and looked around, bewildered, and then began wailing inconsolably. The visions varied at the start, but they ended the same way, like a chorus describing a great encampment of all the Dakota people who had ever died, where the buffalo came eagerly to feed them, and there was no sorrow but only joy, where relatives thronged out with happy laughter to greet the newcomer. That was the best of all. Waking up to the drab and wretched present after such a glowing vision, it was little wonder that they walked as if their poor hearts would break in two with disillusionment. But at least they had seen. They preferred that vision to rest or food or sleep. And so I suppose the authorities did think they were crazy, but they weren't. They were only terribly unhappy. That was the so-called ghost dance, or more appropriately called spirit dance, which, as I said, originally looked so innocent, but then seemed very threatening and was capitalized on by the president for political gain in the 19th century. You can see why this apocalyptic movement, this desire for a Messiah, a Christ-like figure, this is an example of syncretism, where their native beliefs were melded with some Christian beliefs because of the Christian missionaries. But you can see why this kind of apocalyptic vision would be so popular. They had lost their horses and their land, including the sacred Black Hills. They had lost their children to boarding schools, and they had lost their autonomy and come under colonial rule. And so among the Lakota people, approximately 1/3 of them, 4,000 to 5,000, and also many Dakota people, participated in the ghost dances. So going back to 1890 and that terrible time after Sitting Bull's death, and I said they moved to the south. There were about several hundred Native people, and they were surrounded by the United States Army troops, and even though they raised a white flag of surrender, there were nearly 500 soldiers. They had Hotchkiss guns, which were the automatic weapons of the day. It would have a wheel that turned around, firing multiple bullets in a short period of time. And so the soldiers fired on the Lakota people, which included men, women, and children who had very few weapons. And so between 270 and 300 died that day. And now historians, as well as the Lakota people, generally call it not the Battle of Wounded Knee, but the Wounded Knee Massacre. And that, and for that event, 20 of those soldiers received the Medal of Honor, and that's what Native people have asked the United States to revoke, and that's what the Secretary of War announced 1 month ago today. In response to that, my notes are a little bit disheveled. But in response to that, there have been an outcry from Catholic and Episcopal church leaders, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and others who have vowed to continue to demand that those medals be revoked. And I have a quote also from Rose Paz, who was here last year when her niece, the principal from the Rosebud School, spoke to us. And Rose Paz had something important to say. Here we are. I would like those with spiritual beliefs to step up and decry the injustice perpetuated in the massacre, which included women and children. As a nation, the dominant society is swift to condemn acts of violence in other nations, while the blood of innocents still drips from their historic swords. As a parenthetical note, I should mention also the events of 1973, which many of you will remember, as I do a little bit. For 71 days, from February through May of that year, the American Indian movement went to Wounded Knee and took it over because of the fact that it had been the site of the massacre in the previous century. They did this in 1973 to call attention to Bureau of Indian Affairs corruption, and it got worldwide attention. And of course the publicity in here in South Dakota was not favorable, but it was also distorted by the FBI and some of their propaganda campaigns against the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I was a college student in England that year, And if anybody over there had heard of South Dakota, they were two things that we were known for: the home of George McGovern, who had been the presidential candidate in the previous year, and the uprising that was taking place at Wounded Knee. That uprising did lead to eventual legislative changes. In 1978, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act finally allowed Native Americans to practice their religion, their traditional religions again. And another Repatriation Act allowed the remains of the deceased to be exhumed and reburied on tribal lands. And so that has been taking place up to this day. In 1980, the Supreme Court heard the case for the Lakota people who wanted the Black Hills. And Justice Harry Blackmun's majority opinion, the court found in favor of the Lakota, and Harry Blackmun wrote, "A more ripe and rank case of dishonorable dealings will never be found in our history. The U.S. had broken the Fifth Amendment. President Grant had broken his treaty obligation to prevent trespass into the Black Hills. And in the 8-1 decision, the United States owed the Lakota people $106 million. But the Lakota didn't want the money. They wanted the land." A few weeks later, one Oglala Sioux leader compared his people to the Jewish people. They had it in their minds to come back to Israel, and for 2,000 years it was impossible, but they finally did it. Someday we're going to have the Black Hills again, if the people really want it in their hearts. And so this is known as the longest legal fight in American history. One can't help thinking about the history of Europe and what the Jewish people suffered under the Nazis, and the fact that today in Germany, high schools are required to teach about the Holocaust, and Germany has also created small brass plaques with names, birth dates, and dates of deportation for thousands of Holocaust victims, showing where they lived prior to being taken away. There are 70,000 of these little brass plaques in more than 1,000 cities and towns across Europe. I know that's only a fraction of the 6 million who died, but it's a start. And even Canada and Australia have made some efforts at truth-telling and reconciliation. They're not perfect, but they have made an effort. In contrast to the United States, has done little or nothing. In Australia, they came up with an idea in the late 90s when the government refused to do anything about apologies to their indigenous people. The activists in Australia created so-called sorry books, placed in libraries, churches, schools, and other places where people could write an apology to the indigenous people of Australia. More than 500,000 people signed these sorry books, and that eventually helped to push the Australian government to take real action. For this message, I was dependent on this book, Our History is the Future, by a assistant professor at New Mexico University, and also the one book, South Dakota 2025, entitled The Cost of Free Land. And I commend that book to you, written by a Jewish writer who was from the West Coast but had roots in South Dakota and began to learn about the history after the Homestead Act was passed and this land was settled by people from Europe. It included Jewish people. And so she came back and interviewed relatives and others and wrote that tremendous book, The Cost of Free Land. And as a person of faith, she quotes in there how Jewish scholars over the centuries have insisted on the moral obligation to pursue justice, to repair the world, and to take responsibility for our part in whatever wrong has been done. And so in that particular vein, she quotes the philosopher Maimonides, who has the 7 laws of repentance. And I find this to be one thought-provoking way to think about trying to right the wrongs of the past. Did I say 7? It's 6 laws of repentance. Number 1, stop doing the harm. Number 2, confess as specifically as possible, ideally out loud in public. Number 3, begin the work of transforming yourself from a person capable of doing harm to one who is not. And sometimes that would mean a name change. And so you can think of stories in the Bible of people whose names were changed at a particular point, such as Saul becoming Paul. Number 4, financial restitution. Number 5, apologize in such a way that you do not anticipate being forgiven, but you understand how you have caused pain. And then number 6, make different choices in the future. So that's something, of course, that we can all apply to our personal lives as well, as we think about the wrongs that we cause others. And of course, if there is ever a time when our country would see fit to apologize, there was a weekly worded one, as you probably know, put together in the Obama administration and incorporated as a small paragraph into a defense appropriations bill. And it was not read out loud, and it was simply signed with no fanfare, no Native people present. So that seemed really disappointing. But anyway, it's unfinished business in our history. And of course, those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it. May it not be so. May we learn from our history and learn to repent.
At this time, we are going to.
Can't hear you.
Oh, is it on now? Is that better? At this time, we're going to collect the offering. And if we could read together words to receive the offering. We give these gifts freely We receive these gifts gratefully. We dedicate these gifts to the work of our congregation, serving human wholeness, caring for our planet, upholding religious freedom, welcoming the stranger, loving one another. And also, I didn't say, but half of today's plate offering will support Promising Futures, which benefits students at Title I schools. So, let's see, where am I? Oh, and now we'll do our closing song, number 120, Turn Back, and we're doing verses 1 and 2. Please rise as you're able. Thank you for that. Carol's wonderful. And for our third reading, number 682. Beauty is before me, and beauty behind me. Above me and below me hovers the beautiful. I am surrounded by it. I am immersed in it. In my youth, I am aware of it, and in old age, I shall walk quietly in the beautiful trail. In beauty, it is begun. In beauty, it is ended. And that is from the Navajo Indians of North America. So now we will extinguish the chalice. And if you would read with me, the chalice is extinguished, but the light goes on. If you would like to please stay for fellowship downstairs in Eliza's kitchen, followed by a circle discussion back up here. So thank you.